Sub-Saharan Africa is one of the poorest areas of the world, and as such, it has a high disease burden. Thankfully, there's organisations such as yourself aiming to reduce that burden and the amount that people spend out of their own pockets on their own health. Unfortunately, it can be difficult to know which programme to fund and in which country, and also difficult to know what the stakeholders of those programmes might think about your decision making. My name's Callum Patrick, and you've asked me to have a look at what programmes you might fund now and in 1 year's time, and what the stakeholders might think of your decision making. So, the particular stakeholder in this case is the people who are giving you money, that is your donors. I think it's likely that their goals align with your own for the simple reason it's unlikely that people who are giving you substantial amounts of money disagree with your strategic goals. There might be some exceptions to this. For example, a drug company accused of focusing on profits might give in order to improve their own reputation, but generally speaking, it's a safe bet that people who are funding you believe in what you're doing. Because of this, we're using DALI per 10k population as a measure of disease burden and the out-of-pocket expenditure per capita as the measure of how much people are spending on their own health. And the weights for these two things have not changed. The top three alternatives when we run this through the MAVA analysis are South Sudan, Zambia, and Malawi, all for non-communicable diseases. So we're making decisions to what to fund now, but we're also making decisions now what we're going to fund in 1 year's time. The difficulty is that we actually don't know what the world is going to look like in 1 year's time. It's possible that disease burden might have gone up or down by 5%, or the out-of-pocket expenditure might have gone up or down by 5% for each of the programs that we're looking at. This will reflect the countries themselves and other agents within that country. So does that country have a stable government? Is that government funding healthcare programs? If it is that prevention or cure? Once they're funded and enacted, do they actually have the resources on the ground to be able to make that policy happen? Are there NGOs in the area that are helping? Are there other countries getting involved with the aid programs? So based on these things, we've assumed that South Sudan is probably going to worsen. So you can see we think there's a 70% chance disease burden will go up and a 75% chance the out-of-pocket expenditure will go up. And these estimates are based on the fact that things are very politically unstable and there's increasing conflict in that region. Conversely, we think it is more likely that Zambia's disease burden will go down with a 60% chance and that the out-of-pocket expenditure will go down with a 55% chance. And that's based on the fact that that region is becoming generally more stable and there's more spending on health. So now that we have some idea of what might happen, we then build this thing called a decision tree. And the idea is that we make a decision now, we then decide what we're going to fund in that 1 year's time. So that's another decision that we're making at this time. And then we work out what might happen over the course of the next year in terms of the total disease burden, which is here, and in terms of the out-of-pocket expenditure. So, for example, if we decide to fund South Sudan now and Zambia in 1 year's time, we then know that disease burden might increase or decrease for our program in 1 year's time. So that's the Zambia program. We know that out-of-pocket expenditure in each case might increase or decrease. So increase or decrease in each case. So if we follow one branch along, so say we did fund South Sudan now, and we said we're going to fund Zambia in a year's time, and then it turned out that the disease burden did increase, but the out-of-pocket expenditure decreased, the total MAVA score that we get would be 392. So if we then work that back, so if we then use the probabilities to work out, well, that's great. So it could be 401 or 392 in this case, but what do we expect based on the probabilities? We end up with this number here, 396. And if we then continue to work the tree back in that way, we work out that our best option is to fund Zambia now and then South Sudan in 1 year's time. And that's because the expected MAVA score from doing that is 397 compared to 392 on the other trees. So we then put this in a graphical representation. So this is that expected value if we did this. So this is the Zambia followed by South Sudan, and the blue line represents the expected value for each combination of programs. This top line represents the best possible outcome. So that's if the score went up. So if the disease burden and the out-of-pocket expenditure went up over a year, then that total score would be the highest possible. Let's say they both went down by 5% over the course of 1 year and we'd chosen this combination of programs. This is the lowest score that we'd achieve. Now, there are a couple of assumptions. So we are assuming that it can only go up or down by 5% for both of the attributes that we're looking at. We've also made the big assumption that it might be a good idea to allow South Sudan to get worse before funding it. So if we allow South Sudan to get worse for 1 year, naturally its score will go up, and that then makes that total score look better. But of course, if we intervene this year, it might be that things actually didn't get as bad in South Sudan, so it might be that prevention is better than cure. So although this ends up with the highest possible score, it might not reflect our goals. However, based on the information we have, the best option would be to fund Zambia and South Sudan. So we're using the MAVA to allow us to make the best decision now. It allows us to compare different choices by assigning values to the attributes. The decision tree then allows us to compare multiple sequential decisions and to incorporate uncertainties when we do so. When we use them together, the MAVA allows us to provide scores that let us populate that decision tree. In other words, the decision tree lets us work out what the total value of decision made now is, the decision made after that, so what we found in 1 year, and then it allows us to incorporate the uncertainty of what will actually happen in the next year into that decision-making process. So when we do this, we work out that the best option for the donors to your programme, whose goals align with your own, would be to fund Zambia first and then South Sudan in 1 year's time if we have to make that decision today.